Alright, so I have what I call the originalist, living, breathing constitutional jurisprudence. Alright, like, it's originalist and it is living, breathing. Right, like, one of the lines that I often say is that I'm not as opposed to the living, breathing Constitution as I am opposed to ridiculous court decisions. Okay, you can take your pick, except for Citizens United, that one's good. Right, I will defend that one. So here's how I see originalism in the first place. Let's walk through this here, all right? So what we do is we take the founders and bring them to the current year in order to look at our circumstances. Right? That's my view. Right? A lot of people leave the founders in their time. I'm saying no, you bring the founders over here. Now here's the catch, right? You have to give them a few months or a period of time to study history that's happened in the meantime so they can get caught up, right? Now, it's still originalist because they are still people that were raised in what we might call the ancient world, right? It's just a few hundred years ago, but it's, you know, they're somewhat ancient, the founders, right? So we bring them to the current year, they get to study up, and then we ask them, okay, so what's your advice, right? And what they would say is, well, you should probably ask Plato and Aristotle because they have the championship belts, right? Like whenever you're doing any policy analysis or anything like that, you want to consult the champions, and that's Plato and Aristotle. So then, we say, okay, we bring Plato and Aristotle to the current year, right? And we ask them, okay, so what's your advice, right? And they say, well, we give them time to study, and then we ask them, what's your advice? And then they say, well, you got these founders over here. Right? They're pretty legit, like George Washington, right? George Mason, Benjamin Franklin, right? They would just say the names over and over again, just dramatically, right? Thomas Jefferson, right? Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, right? Just the names go on and on, right? And so they would recommend the founders, and so we are at a standstill, right? But not really. Really, at this situation, we just need to consider a particular example, right? At this point, we can't really discuss it in an abstract way, right? So what we know at this point is that the founders would recommend Plato and Aristotle, and that Plato and Aristotle would recommend the founders, all right? Well, if we don't know that, that's what I am asserting, okay? So I'm just going to go over one example here, and it's the Second Amendment, right? Because there's a lot of discussion about how the Second Amendment, doesn't apply to our times, etc. So, what would all of these people think if they were here and weighing in on the Second Amendment? Because see, here's the thing: like, let's just say that it's true that, and there is some truth to this, but let's say that it's true that the purpose of the Second Amendment was so that the citizens would be armed so that they could oppose a potential tyrannical government, right? And I actually, do commentary about a potential civil war and so forth. And I'm realistic about it, and I don't think that it's actually going to happen, that there would be a tyrannical government, that would need to be opposed with a militia in that way, right? That is anachronistic, right? We don't need the Second Amendment for that reason. And that would be clear to these people, the founders, and to Plato and Aristotle. But when they learned that there's this movement, the left, is trying to weaken the Second Amendment, they would take it seriously because it's still important that people have the ability to have arms, but just for a different reason. Right? The reason why we need the Second Amendment today is because the same movement, the left, wants all of the sketchiest people in society to not be well policed, right? When they're well policed, it's said to be racist, right? And so we have to police them less, right? In order for there to be equality, right? And, I'm not saying anything sinister here, right? I want the best things for these people, and the best thing for them is to be well policed, but I'm a right winger, right? Leftists say, no, these people should be policed less, right? And ultimately, we should understand their rage, and we should understand that they want to get together in groups, in mobs, and go out and cause, damage to all of our property, right? And that's only going to get worse because these people are pissed off. Their demands can't be satisfied. That is the real threat that we face. That's why we need the Second Amendment. This would be clear to all these great minds if we brought them to the current year. Okay, that's my opinion. And that's what they would say. They would say, well, you still need the Second Amendment, but just not for the reasons we needed it. And so they would say that we would have to be out of our mind to weaken it through a judicial process just because our reason is different than their reason. Right? And so someone might say, oh, well, that's not really originalism because you've changed the purpose of the Second Amendment. But it is originalist because the people giving us this advice are the founders, and they are Plato and Aristotle, right? Like, I'm supposing that they grew up in that era and in their respective eras, and that we're taking them to the current year and getting them caught up on history, and they're giving us their advice in that context, right? They didn't grow up in the literal modern world, in the current year world, with all of the prejudices that are heaped on us. They grew up in the ancient world, and there's a lot of talk that, like, oh, Thomas Jefferson would be a leftist. Like, leftism was not discredited in his era like it is in ours, right? Like, I don't think it's a given that Thomas Jefferson would be a leftist or would be a Bernie Sanders type, right? Like, he repudiated the French Revolution within his own lifetime, okay? So it's still originalist in that sense. But it's also living, breathing, because I'm satisfied to say, you know what really is the right thing to do, right? Like, it's more important to do the right thing than anything else. And in that case, this is our example, the Second Amendment. The right thing to do is to uphold it because people still need guns in order to protect themselves from the sketchy people who are going to be policed less and less as the left acquires more and more power. I hadn't really thought about this parallel before, but there is something about our situation that reminds me of, the founding era and the end of the 18th century. And, one of the things that the American Revolution set forth was a sort of a fanatic belief in equality and democracy that really ran counter to, a lot of the actual founders, right? Like, there was the Federalist Party, which was sort of elitist. And what happened was that ultimately democracy just became more and more popular because, who's going to criticize equality? If, like, there's me, I'll criticize it, but it's a very difficult thing to criticize. Paul Johnson is a historian I've read on this, and he says that one of John Adams' mistakes is that a president should never, criticize democracy. I think that's the way he put it, right? So what happened was there was just this equality movement, and the Federalist Party fell out of favor. They managed to get like a last sort of gasp with John Marshall as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. But the Federalist Party sort of fell out of favor because of this equality movement. And, I think there's a lot of parallels with that today because, equality is just so hot right now. I mean, you could maybe say the left has gone too far, but I wouldn't rule out the left, gaining power in any way they can going forward. And so that's why we still need the Second Amendment. Anyway, so that's it. That's the originalist, living, breathing constitutional jurisprudence. You know, hashtag Plato did nothing wrong, hashtag ancient Greek lives matter, hashtag Strauss it up, hashtag I'll take it, and thank you for watching.